Have you ever heard the saying that no matter how good you are at something, there's always an Asian kid who's better at it? Well, that's Orhan's entire life. He is known as a jack of all trades, meaning he can learn almost any skill. But no matter how hard he tries, there's always going to be someone better than him. So he needs to find a way to overcome his weakness. One day, Orhan was working at his desk when all of a sudden, the party leader tells him he is being kicked out of the party. Oliver tells Orhan that he has been ignoring the power imbalance in the party for a while now because he and Orhan are childhood friends and he wanted to remain by his side, but at this point, he can't deny that keeping Orhan in the party would just slow the party down. Oliver is really trying to be nice and let Orhan down gently, but the other two are being total jerks about it. Anneli and Derek both call Orhan a sack of dead weight and tell him the team would be much better off without him. And while Oliver would never have said that out loud, there's some truth to their accusations, so he asks Orhan to formally resign from the hero party. Orhan is heartbroken as he thinks back to how he and Oliver formed this party 8 years ago and quickly rose to S rank together. They were even the first to reach the 94th floor of the Great Southern Dungeon, so he can't understand why Oliver is abandoning him now. Oliver clarifies that he understands how important having an enchanter like Orhan, who is capable of using support magic, has been for the party, but last month, during a joint raid, he observed how a different S-rank party fought with their support mage, and to put it frankly, Orhan's support magic sucks compared to that girl's. And Orhan can't even deny it because he knows it's the truth. His support magic has always been mid, no matter how much he practiced, but he says the only reason his spells are so mediocre is because he was originally meant to be a swordsman, but he had to convert to support magic to balance out the party. However, before he could finish the sentence, Derek cuts him off and reminds him that the only reason Orhan had to switch to being an enchanter is because Oliver is way better at swordsmanship than he is. Orhan can both wield a sword and cast support magic, but all around he's pretty mid when it comes to his skill level, and as much as Oliver hates to do this to him, he says he has already found a replacement enchanter, so Orhan's help is no longer needed. He already knows the other two don't like him, but if Oliver is the one giving him the boot, then there truly is no reason to remain in this party. He gets up and starts walking towards the door, and as he is leaving, Anneli talks about how glad she is that he won't be here to boss them around anymore. She also tells him that he shouldn't feel too bad about himself because his skills are still good enough for him to make it as an A-rank adventurer, but an inferior fighter like him is not cut out to be part of an S-rank party anymore. Hearing that from her really stings, so he decides to go off on his own and tackle the southern dungeon to prove that he's not inferior. His sword skills may not be the best, but they are still strong enough for him to handle a group of goblins on his own, and since he can also use support spells, he is able to constantly buff himself with strength magic to make his fights a little easier. Getting the timing right is a bit tricky, but with enough practice, he will be able to cast spells effortlessly in the middle of combat, and no one will ever call him worthless again. After he's done goblin slaying for the day, he heads over to the teleportation crystal to register his card so he can come straight to the 7th floor next time. But while he's there, he sees another party running up to the crystal. He starts walking away because he would rather not get involved with a bunch of randoms, but as he is leaving, he hears the party members panicking because they were just ambushed by a group of orcs, and while desperately trying to escape, one of their party members was left behind. The leader tries to assure himself that leaving her behind was the right choice since they all would have died if they tried to fight. The others ask him if they should go back to save her, but the leader doesn't think that would be a good idea since they aren't strong enough to beat all those orcs. However, Orhan overhears this, and even though it's none of his business, he can't stand the thought of someone else being abandoned by their party, so he turns to the party leader and insults him for leaving a party member to die. One of the party members gets offended and tries to punch Orhan, yelling that he had no choice because he wasn't strong enough to save her. But Orhan flips him on his ass and calls him worthless before demanding to know where the girl was left behind. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the dungeon, the girl in question has been cornered by the orcs, and they are closing in on her fast. She tries putting up a barrier to keep herself safe, but there's still nowhere for her to run, and it's only a matter of time before the orcs smash through. Tears well up in her eyes as the orcs finally break through and her doom is almost guaranteed, but at the last second, a wind spell is cast in front of the orcs, pushing them back and buying time for Orhan to step in front of the girl to protect her. The girl is in shock because she wasn't expecting anyone to come save her, but before she gets a chance to speak to Orhan, the orcs begin their attack, so he runs out to intercept them. Sophia assumes he must be a swordsman, but to her surprise, she sees Orhan cast support magic on himself in the middle of the fight. Orhan then proceeds to slice one of the orcs in half, and to make things a little easier, he enchants his sword with sharpness 5 so he can deal with the rest of them. There are a lot more orcs here than he thought there would be, so he can see why the party was forced to run away, and he might owe them an apology later, but for someone of his skill level, this much is easy to handle. The remaining orcs all charge at him at once, so Orhan begins slicing through them one after the other, and Sophia is astonished because she has never seen anything like it before. Once he's done, Orhan turns to the girl and asks if she's okay, but she's so stunned that all she can do is fall to the ground and start bawling her eyes out. Orhan makes sure she's alright and helps her get out of the dungeon, and after that, he starts walking away, but she calls out to him and says she would like to thank him properly for saving her, so she introduces herself as Sophia Claudel. Orhan recognized the Claudel family name, and he also spots the crest on her cloak, leaving now doubts about her identity. He introduces himself to her as well, and afterwards, Sophia offers to treat Orhan to dinner tonight as thanks for saving her. Orhan initially tries to decline, but Sophia is really insistent, so he eventually caves and agrees to go out with her. A little while later, she leads him over to one of her favorite restaurants, and though it isn't the fanciest place out there, she really likes the food here, so she thinks Orhan will like it as well. Orhan notices that the signboard out front has the same crest as Sophia's cloak, and it's pretty clear that she must be a member of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits, one of the biggest guilds in the kingdom. The clan is extremely powerful, so he's starting to second-guess getting involved with Sophia since things might get complicated. All of a sudden, Sophia spots her sister sitting over at one of the tables, so she goes over to ask her what she's doing here. Selma explains that she had a meeting nearby, so she decided to come here for dinner, but that aside, she asks Sophia what she's doing here with a man, because she's way too young to have a boyfriend. However, after taking a closer look, she realizes that the man is actually Orhan, and they happen to know each other. Sophia is surprised that Orhan knows her sister, but there's no way he could ever forget her. Selma Claudel is the leader of the most powerful S-rank party in the Silver Rabbits, as well as the most powerful enchanter on the whole continent. She's the reason that support mages are so respected when it comes to party formations, and coincidentally, she's the same enchanter that Orhan's party used as a basis for kicking him out. He knew Sophia was also part of the Silver Rabbit clan, but he didn't expect her to be directly related to Selma. But he doesn't recall ever doing anything to offend Selma, so he doesn't understand why she looks so mad at him. Selma gets in his face and asks him if he thinks it's appropriate to be going on a date with her 14-year-old sister this late at night. Orhan understands why Selma would be concerned, so he assures her that she is misunderstanding the situation and that he has no romantic interest in her sister whatsoever. However, the way he said that makes Selma even more angry because she thinks he's saying Sophia isn't attractive enough for him. Sophia begs Selma to stop making a scene in front of the man who saved her life, and upon learning that Orhan saved Sophia's life, Selma is very apologetic for her rudeness and thanks him for his help. They all sit down together, and this is the first time Orhan and Selma have gotten a chance to talk like this. Orhan explains that they met during last month's raid, and since they were both enchanters, they spent a lot of time together, although Orhan was mostly just assisting Selma. Selma tells him he was a huge help, but that much is to be expected from someone in the hero's party. However, Orhan tells her he isn't actually part of the hero's party anymore. Selma is shocked to hear that because she can't imagine why the party would want to get rid of someone as useful as Orhan, but she's not one to miss a good opportunity, so she asks if he would be interested in accepting a job. Orhan tells her he actually wants to adventure alone for a while, so he can't join her clan, but she says she just needs someone to join a teaching expedition that her clan will be hosting tomorrow, and she assures him that he will be paid well for his efforts. All he needs to do is focus on teaching the new recruits. They plan to spend roughly 3 days down on floor 50, and they already have a group of A-rank adventurers leading the expedition, but she'd feel a lot better if Orhan were there to help. After all, after working alongside him on the joint raid, she can see just how capable Orhan truly is as an enchanter. Orhan is honored to hear that Selma respects his enchanter skills, but he was just kicked out of his party for being a weak enchanter compared to Selma, and he doesn't want to limit himself to support magic again, so he politely declines her offer. Selma is surprised since she didn't think Orhan would turn her down, but he says he has his reasons. Selma doesn't intend to push the issue if he really doesn't want to do it, but Sophia begins pleading with him to reconsider because she would feel a lot safer on the expedition if Orhan were there. Orhan still doesn't want to relive his days as nothing but an enchanter, but seeing Sophia plead with him like that makes him reconsider, so he tells her he will think about it before he makes his decision. Selma is pleased to hear that Orhan is at least going to consider her offer, but to be clear, he informs her that he will only accept if he's allowed to fight with his sword because he doesn't want to be limited to just enchantments anymore. Selma can't believe what she just heard because she has never seen an enchanted switch to swordsmanship, and she honestly doubts that Orhan would be any good as a swordsman, but she figures that if things get really bad, he will probably just go back to using enchantments. She tells him that if he decides to join the expedition, then he should come to the Silver Rabbit HQ early tomorrow morning, and they go their separate ways for the night. Before Orhan heads home, he makes one final stop at a weapon shop, and he seems to be pretty close with the owner, which is why he came here to chat. The old man prepares a cup of tea for him and thanks Orhan for his help because business around here has been booming ever since he started recommending this place. However, that's kind of what Orhan wanted to talk to him about. He informs the old man that he was kicked out of the hero's party, so now no one will listen to him even if he does recommend the store, and he wants to apologize for not being able to help anymore. However, the man tells him he has nothing to apologize for. Whether Orhan is part of the hero's party or not, he's still the same person, and he has already done so much to help here, for which the man is very grateful. Orhan may not be a hero anymore, but he's still a hero at heart, so the man tells him he should live for himself from now on and help as many people as he wants to. The next morning, Orhan heads to the Silver Rabbit HQ and meets the president, Vince Breyer, and Vince has heard a lot about Orhan, so he says it's a pleasure to finally meet him. Orhan says he's going to need a few more details on the expedition before he decides whether to take part in it or not, so Vince asks Selma to fill him in on everything he needs to know. She explains that the expedition will be to the 51st floor, but they will only be heading up to the 21st floor on the first day, and then they'll slowly progress all the way down to the 51st floor after that. Before Orhan showed up, Selma met with Vince ahead of time so they could talk about how dumb it was for the hero party to kick Orhan out. They won't be anywhere near as strong as they used to be now that he's gone, because his support magic was hard carrying them through most battles. It's true that the potency of Orhan's support spells is lower than average, but his cast speed is top-notch, at least 4 times faster than Selma's. And on top of that, he was using multiple original spells at once, while also constantly analyzing the battlefield to decide the best move to make. Vince finds it hard to believe that someone so capable would be labeled as useless, but Selma assumes that Orhan was just so good at his job that the hero party didn't notice all his contributions to their success. Back to the present, Selma is done explaining the details of the expedition, and basically, there are going to be 10 different rookie parties with 5 escorts, including Orhan and Selma. For the most part, rookies are supposed to handle things on their own, but if something out of the ordinary happens, the escorts will step in to make sure nobody gets hurt. Orhan gets the gist of it so far, but he asks why they are only bringing 5 escorts. Normally, with such a short expedition schedule, you'd want to minimize risk as much as possible by hiring as many escorts as possible. Selma makes up an excuse and says she wouldn't want to make it too easy for the rookies, but Orhan knows that's not the real reason. They must have some secret objective they are trying to achieve, and there's no way they would tell Orhan about it since he's an outsider, so he decides to just drop the question and go along with it anyway. Vince thanks him for being so understanding, and as part of the deal, Orhan will receive 2 gold pieces in advance and 10 more upon successful completion of the mission. Orhan asks if they are sure about this, since what they are paying him is the equivalent of a year's worth of living expenses for a few days of work, but Selma tells him he's worth every penny to them. The next day, Orhan shows up early at the entrance of the dungeon as agreed, and once he gets there, he sees a bunch of the new adventurers preparing themselves nearby. A few moments later, Selma and Sofia arrive as well, and Sofia seems really happy to see Orhan. A little too happy if you ask Selma, so she reminds Orhan that Sofia is under 18 and he had better not try anything with her. That aside, Selma asks Orhan why he's standing so far away from the rest of the group, so he explains that he didn't want to make the recruits nervous by standing too close since they've never seen him before. He makes a good point, but the recruits are going to need to get to know Orhan sooner or later, so Sofia offers to introduce Orhan to everyone. First up, she takes him to meet the other 3 escorts, and they introduce themselves as Anthem, Bernard, and Kathy. Both Bernard and Anthem are defenders, while Kathy is a healer, but Orhan thinks this whole thing is a bit odd since he may be able to use his sword. But Selma didn't know that when she asked him to join, so that means she was planning to go in without a frontline attacker. The reason for this is that Selma got really desperate. After all, the Silver Rabbits haven't made any progress in the past year, so she wanted to achieve something as soon as possible, even if it is a little risky, but she's not going to admit that. To avoid getting questioned, she changes the subject and offers to introduce Orhan to the rookies next. She addresses all of the recruits and says she knows they must be nervous about going on their first dungeon dive all the way to the 51st floor, but she assures them that nothing is going to go wrong because she has enlisted a group of very powerful adventurers to help in case something goes wrong. She then introduces Orhan as the cornerstone of the operation and tells everyone that he has made it all the way down to the 94th floor before, so they can trust him to have their backs. The rookies are all amazed by Orhan's accomplishments, especially when they find out that he used to be a member of the hero party. But Orhan isn't used to this much attention, so he doesn't know how to react. Now that everyone has gotten familiar with Orhan, Selma tells them to finish their final equipment check before they head down into the dungeon. She then turns to Orhan and says she would like him to escort Group 10 because they are the most promising rookies of the bunch, so she thinks they could learn a lot from having Orhan as an example. He is then introduced to the special Group 10 that Selma talked about, and he finds out that Sophia is a member here, but he doesn't understand why there are only 3 members on this team when all the others have 4. Logan speaks up and confidently says it's because none of the other rookies can keep up with them, so they were grouped together instead. Logan introduces himself as the party's enchanter and says he will one day surpass Selma, and Orhan thinks it's good that he has ambition, but his attitude is a bit of a problem. Next up is Caroline, and she introduces herself as the party's defender, but Orhan is a bit confused because she doesn't seem to be wearing any armor or carrying a shield for that matter. Caroline explains that she doesn't use that stuff, and instead will just jump out of the way when monsters get too close. In her defense, dodge-type defenders are actually a thing. Her tactic would work, but Orhan warns her that being a dodge-type defender requires some Sekiro-level evasion skills, so it's difficult for beginners to pull off. He asks if any of the teachers warned her of the learning curve, and Logan mentions that Caroline was warned many times, but she never listened to the advice, and the two of them start fighting afterwards. Orhan now realizes what Selma meant when she said this group was special. But on the bright side, Sophia is here too. And she's the most normal student he could hope for since she won't be causing him any problems. A little while later, they all head into the dungeon together, and even though they were all causing a ruckus outside, in here, they are behaving really well. They are all glad to have Orhan around. But Caroline wonders why someone from the hero's party is joining their expedition since the Silver Rabbit clan is one of the hero party's rivals. Orhan clarifies that he isn't a member of the hero party anymore, and Caroline is shocked to hear this, so she asks him why. But Orhan doesn't want to admit that he got kicked out, so he tells her to mind her own business. Even so, Caroline continues talking nonstop and mentions how Sophia wouldn't stop bragging about meeting Orhan the other day, and Sophia is a little embarrassed, but she does think that Orhan is amazing, and she's really happy he decided to come after all. A few minutes later, as they are walking through the cave, a group of wolves suddenly appears behind them, and normally, they would have to stop to face them, but Orhan isn't worried because he already left a bunch of traps behind as they entered, so any monsters that try to sneak up on them will instantly be dealt with. This way, they won't have to waste any time on watching their backs, but I'm starting to see why Orhan was labeled as useless because he doesn't tell a single person that he is basically guarding their rear all by himself. As they progress through the dungeon, Orhan gets a chance to observe how the rookie fights, and he's honestly impressed. He initially thought Logan was nothing but a rookie with a big ego, but he actually has decent enchanter skills. If he can maintain his output during longer battles, then he could easily join an A-rank party. However, for someone who's supposed to be the party leader, he's absolutely terrible at giving instructions, though he will probably get better with time. As for Caroline, she has the speed necessary to be a dodge-type defender, but she's a bit too aggressive because the second she sees a monster, she charges right at it. Technically, that's her job as a defender, but it still seems a little too reckless to Orhan. Next is Sophia, and she's not as impressive as the other two, but she's still decently skilled as a caster, and she doesn't have any obvious flaws in her fighting style, so Orhan thinks she has a promising future ahead of her. Thankfully, the rest of the expedition went smoothly, and by the end of day 1, they had successfully made it to the 21st floor of the dungeon. Selma later meets with Orhan and asks him what he thought of Group 10, and he tells her she was right about them having potential, but they don't really work as a team, especially Caroline. But Selma already knows how difficult they can be at times. It's time to head home, so they say goodbye for the day and agree to meet back up tomorrow morning, but the next day, Orhan wakes up to a terrible sight. The hero party has officially gone public about him being kicked out, and that means everyone in the city is aware of it now. He knew this would happen eventually, but he wishes it could have been after he was done with the expedition since all the students looked up to him because they thought he was a member of the hero party, so if they find out that he was banished, their opinion of him will surely be diminished. Either way, he's still going to have to deal with it, so he starts heading to the dungeon entrance for day 2 of the expedition. However, as he is walking down the street, he is suddenly called out to by Luna. She is also a member of the hero party, and she was always really kind to him whenever they talked, but she was away on an outing when Orhan was kicked out. He knows she would have stuck up for him if she were around, so he wonders if things would have gone differently in that case. But there's no use speculating now. Luna asks him to come back to the hero party because they need his strength, and Orhan is surprised to hear that, so he asks her if the others share her opinion, but she says she hasn't told the others yet. She just came to find him because she knows how important Orhan was to their team. She's serious about wanting to bring him back, but Orhan has already made his decision. He doesn't want to return to the hero party, and even if he did, with the news already in the public eye, it wouldn't make sense for him to return now. Luna hasn't read today's paper yet, so she doesn't know what it says about him, but she reminds him that they promised to conquer the Great Labyrinth together. Mentioning that brings up a lot of painful memories for Orhan, so he pulls his hand away and says that he, Luna, and Oliver made that promise a long time ago, yet Oliver was the one who kicked him out, so it's never going to happen now. He had always hoped that the three of them would stay friends forever, but there's no going back to how things were before. This was the end of episode 2. Subscribe to not miss the next part.